Sorry for the disturbance. So due to the hemolysis is mainly due to the red cell incompatibility. Now, when we transfuse incompatible red cells to a recipient, there will be a hemolytic reactions. Now, due to this hemolysis incompatibility, there is an increased destruction of the donor red cells. This destruction may be acute or delayed. Usually, acute hemolytic transfusion reactions, we can see the intravascular hemolysis. So, mainly due to the ABO incompatibility, and this acute intravascular hemolysis is due to the activation of the complement cascade. Then we are coming to the delayed or extravascular hemolysis. This reaction is mainly due to the RH or minor group incompatibility. Here, either IgG antibody or C3d coated red cells will be removed in the reticuloendothelial system. Now, I want to clarify these two terms. I will do some explanation of these reactions. When we take ABO blood group antigens and antibodies, ABO is a unique blood group system in the human beings. This is the first blood group system identified in our history, but still it is the most important blood group system. Because ABO antigens are the most powerful, most antigenic antigens, and ABO antibodies are the most potent antibodies. So you can imagine these strongest antigens and strongest antibody reaction will be stronger in the patient. Now, ABO, the next feature is, as you know, to develop any immune response, so antibody development, you have to get exposed to the antigen previously. Now, in the ABO system, without getting exposed to the antigens, antigen A or B, you can have anti-A or anti-B in your circulation if you lack any of these antigens. Did you get that? Now, in the ABO system, there are two antigens, antigen A and antigen B. Now, if you lack any of these antigens, you will have the antibody against that particular antigen. So those antibodies are called naturally occurring antibodies. No need to get exposed to the A antigen or B antigen previously. Always, these people will have these antibodies. These antibodies are IgM class antibodies. That is another thing. Now, this ABO system is different from other blood group systems, including RH system. All the minor blood group systems, to develop antibodies, you have to get exposed to the real antigens. That means you must have a previous transfusion history or pregnancy, history of pregnancies, through which you can get exposed to the antigens. Otherwise, they will never have these antibodies in their circulation. So remember that ABO system antibodies are always present in the people if they lack particular antigen. That means if they lack A antigen, they will have the anti-A. If they lack B antigen, they will have the anti-B. Now, if you get group A, they are having antigen A, so they don't have the anti-A, but they will have the anti-B. If you get group AB, they are having both A antigen and B antigen, and they will never have anti-A or B. If you get O people, these people are not having antigen A or B, so they will have both anti and anti-B in their circulation. Now, if we give A blood to a B patient or AB blood to a O patient, these antibodies invariably react with the donor red cells because they are having the corresponding antigens and antibodies in the recipient. Now, these reactions mainly due to the activation of complement system. ABO's antibodies are IgM, as I told you earlier. IgM antibodies are capable of activating the complement cascade. I will come to that later. Now, when we get the delayed extravascular hemolysis, that antibodies are either RH or other minor blood group antibodies. They are IgG antibodies. As you know, IgG antibodies are not usually capable of activating complement system, but some IgG antibodies can activate the complement system only up to the C3d level, not going beyond that. You know, there are 9 complement components. So when there is a cascade reaction, C1 to C9 activation will be there, and there will be the formation of membrane attack complex and fixed on the red cell membrane and cause the lysis of red cell. That is why you get the intravascular hemolysis in acute reaction, acute intravascular and acute hemolytic reactions, because IBU antibodies are IgM. They activate the complement system to up to C9, and there will be hemolysis of red cells within the intraventricular compartment. Now we compare with the RH and other minor blood group incompatibilities. They are IgG, or some IgG antibodies can activate the complement system only up to the C3 level. Then there will be C3d component and IgG bound on the red cell membrane. Now, any red cell coated with IgG or C3d component will be definitely removed in the reticuloendothelial system within few days, and those cells get hemolyzed. So that is why it is called extravascular hemolysis, not in the intravascular compartment, but it is in the extravascular compartment, leading to the continuous lysis of these IgG or C3d coated cells during few days. That is the main difference between acute and delayed. You have to remember these two important things, because these are the very dangerous and 100% preventable transfusion reactions, and most of the time deaths are mainly due to the acute hemolytic transfusion reactions, which is due to the ABO incompatibility. There is a little problem in the slide transition. Sorry for the interruption. The slide is not moving, I think. Right. Now I am coming to the pathophysiology in the intravascular acute hemolytic transfusion reactions. Now you can see there is a red cell. Here the red cell is there. Now antibodies are attacking the red cell membrane, antigen on the red cell membrane. Then they can activate the complement first component C1. Then it will go through the C2, C4, C3, C6, C7, C8, C9. Ultimately, there will be a formation of the membrane attack complex, and as a result, there will be a hole formation and cause the lysis of the red cell in the intravascular compartment. Now, with the activation of C3 and C5 components, these important parts C3A and C5A will be released. Now, these are called the potent anaphylatoxins, which can cause the constriction of smooth muscles, leading to the bronchospasms. So, as a result of ABO incompatibility, patient can get severe dyspnea due to the bronchospasms. And also these C3 and C5A anaphylatoxins can activate the mast cells, granulocytes, and macrophages to release the histamine and cytokines. Now, histamine and cytokines again can constrict the smooth muscles, and this smooth that will be contribute to the further spasm of the bronchial smooth muscles. Then due to the histamine and cytokine action, you can get flushing and fever with the chills and rigors. And this also cytokines and histamine can contribute to the disseminated intravascular coagulation. Then these anaphylatoxins and potent cytokines can act on the vascular endothelial cells, leading to the hypotension and shock. With the antigen antibody complex formation and this hypotension and shock stage with some part of DIC can lead to the renal failure. Now, as a result of lysis of the red cell in the intravascular component, this hemoglobin, free hemoglobin will be filtered through the kidneys, leading to the hemoglobinuria. So here everything is gathered together, all the clinical features and mechanism. So first thing, antibody will react with the antigen present on the red cell membrane, activate the complement system. As a result of that, you get the hemolysis. Then free hemoglobin will be filtered through the kidneys, leading to the hemoglobinuria. So this is a very important positive sign of the hemolytic transfusion reactions. All days you get pass in red color urine. As a result of this mechanism, they can get severe hypotension and shock. They can get bronchospasms and severe dyspnea. They can get DIC and they can get acute renal failure. Due to any of these reasons, hypotension, shock, DIC, renal failure, dyspnea, patient may die at any moment if you are not attending to the patient on time. Right. So ABO incompatible transfusion reactions, as I told you earlier, this is a very dangerous reaction and this can be 100% preventable. So this, now you know that we are not transfusing blood, just taking the blood packs from our stock and just issuing to the patients. Now there is a procedure for issuing blood for the patients. First, we get the sample from the recipient and we check the blood group and we identify the correct blood group donor pack and we do the cross matching to identify whether it is incompatible or not. Now, only compatible blood will be issued to the patient. After assuring that there won't be any ABO or minor blood group incompatibilities, blood can be safely received by the recipient. Now, if we give that 100% guarantee that this blood is compatible with the patient, no harm to the patient transfusing this compatible blood because this blood is compatible with the recipient in the ABO system as well as our other minor blood group systems. But still we get 7, 8, 10 deaths of ABO incompatible transfusion reactions annually. So why we are getting ABO incompatible transfusion reactions if we are issuing correct compatible blood to the patient? So that's mainly due to two things. I will explain them later. So this is mainly due to the misidentification of the patient. Now there are two types of errors which can lead to the ABO incompatible transfusion reactions. One is the technical error, other one is the clerical error. Technical error means when we do the ABO grouping and the compatibility testing in the blood bank, we can do some errors in the blood group or compatibility testing. In that way, we can give incompatible wrong blood to the patient. If we can't identify the patient's group correctly, definitely we will give wrong blood. And if our technical procedure is not performed according to the standard operating procedures, so then there is a chance of not identifying the incompatibility. Then there is a chance of having incompatible transfusion reactions once the patient received this blood. So other thing is the clerical errors. Now this clerical error, now technical errors mainly occur in the blood banks because our MOs are doing the grouping RH and the cross matching. The technical errors, the clerical errors mainly happen in the wards. This is mainly due to the misidentification of the patient. Now you know that we need the sample from the patient. If the person is when a person is collecting the sample from the patient, if that person couldn't identify the patient correctly, that person can draw a sample from the wrong patient. Then ultimately we receive the wrong sample from a wrong patient. We will do all these testing for this wrong sample. Ultimately, this blood pack may be transfused to the correct patient. So there is a possibility of ABO incompatibility and in ABO incompatible transfusion reactions. So this misidentification of the patient can be seen in very emergency situations, like in the operating theaters, ICUs, accident units. So you have to be very careful when you are taking samples from the recipients for the blood preparation in the blood bank. You have to be very careful to correctly identify the patient and send the sample, correct sample to the blood bank. Now, this is again another problem in patients unconscious and anesthetized patients, because now when there is a patient who needs blood transfusions, they have to fill a request form. Now, the request form should carry all the informations of the recipient for the identification. Then a sample should be collected from the recipient, and it should be labeled correctly and should be sent to the blood bank. Now, if you are writing the details of the recipient and handing over to the nursing officer who is going to collect the samples, that nursing officer should be able to identify the real patient according to the information given on the request form. Now, if that nursing officer can't identify the correct patient, or if she misidentify a patient, ultimately that can lead to a collection of a wrong sample. Usually have advised the people who are collecting the samples for the cross-matching to identify the patient positively. Positive identification means once the nursing officer receives the request form, that nursing officer should 100% make sure that she is collecting the blood from the correct patient. So there are informations given in the request form: name, bedhead ticket, ward, sex, and age. All these things are there, and by these informations, anyone can identify the patient. Now, usually when we identify a patient, we can ask by the name whether this patient is Pereira or Silva. Not now, positive identification is not asking by the name, we are asking the patient to tell the name. Now, if the patient is semi-conscious, when we ask whether you are Pereira or Silva, the patient may say yes without understanding what other person is asking. So the positive identification means you have to ask your name, tell me your name. Then patient will automatically tell the patient's correct name. Now, this positive identification will be not possible if the patient is fully unconscious or semi-conscious or anesthetized. So if you are dealing with the patients who are unconscious or anesthetized, or if you are working in a very busy place, you have to be very careful not to misidentify the patient who needs blood when you are collecting the sample for the cross-matching. Now, I have already explained causes clerical errors. This is the commonest cause. Technical errors are not so common because our MOs are well trained in the blood for the blood bank duties. So they are doing day-to-day group in RH and cross-matching. So they are well competent. They are very well competent to do their job. So the technical error part in the ABO incompatibility is not so common. The clerical errors, these are the commonest things because that happen in the ward level. These nurses are may not be fully trained for this purpose, and they are doing various works other than collecting the samples for the cross-matching. And while they are working in the busy ward, so there is a chance of misidentification of the patient. Other thing is, when they collect samples from various patients, if they haven't labeled the samples, they mix up the samples and put the wrong label to the sample bottles. And that sample bottles with the wrong label containing blood from a wrong patient can be sent to the blood bank. That is another possibility of clerical error. Other thing is when the blood is issued to the ward, they have to identify the correct recipient to whom this blood pack is cross-matched and found to be compatible before blood is transfused. If there is a mistake in the identification of the recipient, ultimately this blood pack may transfuse to a wrong patient, leading to the acute hemolytic transfusion reaction. So all these things are very common in the ward setup. So we have to be very careful, as if you are working as intern house officers, you have to make sure that these errors are not happening in your ward. Now, collection of blood samples for the cross-matching is a responsible of the medical officer, not the nursing officer. So you can instruct the nursing officers to collect the blood correctly from the correct patients and label them correctly, because ultimately responsibility is up to the medical officer or qualified doctor. The clinical features of acute hemolytic transfusion reactions, they can get sudden chills. There will be increased temperature 1 to 2 centigrade degrees. Sorry. Headache, flushing, anxiety, muscle pain, hemoglobinuria, low back and chest pain, tachypnea, tachycardia, hypotension, vascular collapse, bleeding, surgical field in the. Now, this bleeding, if the patient is in an operating theater undergoing an surgery, sometimes they may notice that there will be unexplained bleeding from the surgical wound, and as well as patient may get severe hypotension. Usually in the surgeries, hypotension may be due to the blood loss. Now, with the correction of the blood volume, the blood pressure should come up. Now, if there is any unexplainable bleeding from the surgical site, now when you are attending to the bleeding surgical wound, you are doing the diathermy, ligation of the arteries, or suturing, you are expecting the bleeding should be to minimize. Sometimes taking all these efforts, you may not be able to stop the bleeding. So that may be due to the transfusion of incompatible blood if the patient is receiving blood. Other thing is unexplainable severe hypertension, irrespective of administering adequate fluids, patient may still have the severe hypertension. Again, if the patient is receiving blood transfusions, you have to check the blood pack for the incompatibilities. Next thing is the hemoglobinuria. Now I have seen a patient. I have experience while a patient is undergoing a surgery. Patient passed red color urine, and there was unexplainable bleeding from the surgical wound. But still, they couldn't identify that it is due to the wrong blood transfusion, and ultimately they have managed and sent back to the patient to the ward. There, by looking at the blood pack, still the patient was receiving the blood pack, and they were able to identify that was a wrong blood pack cross match for someone else. Now, if you have checked the blood pack in the surgical operating theater while the patient is having red color urine and unexplainable bleeding, that the rest of the reaction could have been minimized. So the patient can get acute renal failure, which can lead to the chronic renal failure, and patient can get DIC, and DIC with the bleeding, patient can get shock and cardiac arrest. Ultimately, patient may die. So this is ABO, acute hemolytic transfusion reactions due to ABO incompatibilities are very dangerous. Most of time patient can die. So your aim should be to prevent any acute hemolytic transfusion reactions by giving correct compatible blood to the patients, avoiding the ABO incompatibilities. Right, so main symptoms in the graphic, you can see systemic patient can get chills and fever. Vascular compartment, they can get severe hypertension and uncontrollable bleeding. Transfused vein, they can get the heat sensation. Now, this heat sensation in the transfused vein is a very positive sign very positive symptom, because patient may start with the symptom of heat sensation at the insertion point of the blood transfused needle. So where patient will complain that I get the heat sensation at this point, and patient may show that along the pathway of the vein that patient is having a burning sensation. Now, if any patient complaining this heat sensation, that will be a first alarming sign of the incompatible transfusion reaction. You have to be very careful to check whether the patient is receiving any wrong blood pack or whether this is a wrong patient receiving someone else's blood pack. Again, the patient can get pain in the lumbar region. Sorry, patient can get increased heart rate, and patient can get constricting pain. Patient can pass hemoglobinuria, and later patient can get hyperbilirubinemia. So these are the systematic the sign symptoms in major acute hemolytic transfusion reaction. So management, if you suspect any ABO incompatible acute hemolytic transfusion reaction, you have to stop the transfusion immediately and get a good IV line and connect a normal IV drip, because you have to keep an line open. Otherwise, patient may get collapsed in the next moment and you may not be able to give any life-saving IV drugs through the IV lines. So you have to stop the transfusion immediately, remove the blood pack, transfusion set, and start a new IV line with a large bore cannula or large bore needle, because this line may be the life-saving line if the patient get cardiac arrest. Then immediately check the patient's identification and the blood pack. To see whether the patient has received a wrong blood pack which is cross-matched compatible for someone else. Then if you notice that if any patient receiving a wrong blood pack, if you notice that, you have to check whether any other patient receiving blood transfusion in your ward, because the person who connect the blood packs to the patients might have been mixed up these two packs. This patient might have received someone else. This patient's blood might have been transfused to another patient. So you can save that patient's life if you properly check the identification of the patients and the blood pack. Then immediately assess the patient quickly, get an idea about the patient's real clinical condition, and you have to start the treatment accordingly. So always you have to provide the cardiorespiratory support, maintain the blood pressure by giving inotrope if the patient is having severe hypertension, maintain the heart rate, and you can maintain the airway. Sometimes patient may get severe bronchospasms. There you may have to give bronchodilators to clear the airway. Now, depending on the patient's clinical situation, you have to treat these reactions like hypotension. You have to ensure the diuresis, and you have to treat the DIC. Now, if there is any patient who has developed acute hemolytic transfusion reactions, there will be acute renal tubular damage, which can lead to the severe acute renal failure. Now, to prevent that, you have to do the forced diuresis to get rid of these things and flush off the kidneys before they get acute tubular damage. So you have to challenge the patients with lot of fluids to ensure the diuresis. If the patient is not passing adequate urine with adequate fluid intake, you have to give the diuretics like furosemide. If the patient response is poor, you can later repeat the dose, and if the response is still poor with adequate fluid intake and with diuretics, if the patient urine pass is not adequate, that means already the patient had developed acute renal failure. So then you can't give fluids and diuretics, you have to manage as acute renal failure. The next important component is the DIC, disseminated intravascular coagulation. So due to various cytokine, various chemicals, substances released in the acute hemolytic reactions, that can trigger to the intravascular coagulation system, and that can lead to the DIC. Now, with the DIC, you know that patient will get consumptional coagulopathy, consumptional thrombocytopenia. Then, if the patient is continuously having bleeding, you have to correct the thrombocytopenia by giving platelet transfusions. If the patient is having severe coagulopathy, you have to give the FFP to correct the coagulation factors. So if there is a DIC component in this type of patients, blood component support is essential to prevent further bleeding and the death of the patient. So that can be due to severe hypertension, severe acute renal failure, or DICO as a result of all these combinations. So it is very important to act on time in the transfusion management. Then you have to do the check of the documentation. As I told you earlier, once you have detected that patient is receiving a wrong blood pack, you have to check any other patient receiving blood transfusion. So this patient's blood pack might have been connected to the other patient, and that patient also having a risk of getting reaction. Then you have to do some investigations to confirm that patient is having acute hemolytic reactions. So one thing is the urine sample for hemoglobinuria. You know that once there is intravascular hemolysis, free hemoglobin will be released into the urine. So take a sample and see the color. It will be red color, and check for the hemoglobinuria. If you noticed any reaction, immediately inform the blood bank and get the assistance from the blood bank in the further management. Now, once you manage the patient, you have to keep the records of this reaction. What is the type of reaction, length of the time of the reaction, and blood volume and type and unit number. So all this should be kept, records should be kept in the bedhead tickets when you detect a reaction and manage once you resuscitate the patient. Then we have to identify why this particular patient had developed acute hemolytic transfusion reaction to cross-match compatible blood. As we know that for the cross-match compatible blood, there is no reason to develop acute hemolytic coagio incompatible reaction, but that has happened. So we have to see what has gone wrong in the transfusion of the blood to this patient. So for that, you have to keep the blood pack, implicated blood pack, which was transfused to the patient in the ward without discarding it. So once the patient has been resuscitated, there are transfusion reactions notification forms. You have to fill that form and collect a sample from the patient, which is called post-transfusion sample. So after the management of the patient, just collect a sample labeled as post-transfusion sample, and you have to send the bedhead ticket with the reaction notification form with remaining blood pack which was transfused to the patient and the post-transfusion sample. By investigation, by doing these investigations, we can tell you what has gone wrong in this acute hemolytic reaction. Whether you have sent a wrong sample, whether you have transfused to a wrong patient, whether it is a wrong blood pack. So we can tell you what has gone wrong after doing the complete investigation. After investigation, we will issue a report to the board explaining everything, the cause and the preventive actions in the patient. Now we are coming to the delayed hemolytic transfusion reactions. Unlike ABO hemolytic transfusion reactions, which is very acute, that can happen within first 24 hours, but delayed hemolytic reactions take days or weeks after the blood transfusion. Now, these delayed hemolytic transfusion reactions are mainly due to the Rh blood group or other minor blood group incompatibilities. Now, as I told you earlier, Rh antibodies and other minor blood group antibodies are IgG antibodies, So IgG antibodies are not capable of activating the complement system. So you are not expecting to get intravascular hemolysis, but IgG coated red cells will be removed in the reticular endothelial system with days lead into the formation of bilirubin, serum bilirubin leading to the jaundice. So patient will get jaundice and hyperbilirubinemia after few days to the transfusion of incompatible minor blood group incompatible transfusions. Clinical features of the delayed hemolytic transfusion reactions. So this is not so dangerous as acute hemolytic reactions. Very rarely patient can get life-threatening reactions. Most of commonly, patient will get jaundice after few days. And patient's red cell, the hemoglobin will further go down. So patient may complain some fatigue and malaise. There will be ongoing gradual red cell destructions. Usually occurs 5 to 10 days after the transfusion. Jaundice appear within first 5 to 7 days. So any patient develop jaundice after 5 to 6, 7 days to the transfusion, think of delayed hemolytic transfusion reactions. Then if you suspect any delayed hemolytic transfusion reactions, you can call the blood bank and send a sample to exclude the possibility of delayed hemolytic transfusion reactions. So laboratory investigations for all the reactions, all hemolytic reactions, we have to do the clerical check of all the documentation. Once we receive the samples to the blood bank and we have the post-transfusion samples, we go for the direct antiglobulin test. We repeat the ABO and RH group of the pre-transfusion sample, which is used for the cross-matching and stored in the blood bank. Usually, when we receive the blood sample for the cross-matching, we keep that sample in the blood bank for 7 days to 10 days. Because in any case, if the patient develop reactions, we must have the previous sample which is used for the cross-matching for the investigations. So we have the pre-transfusion sample. We will get the post-transfusion sample after resuscitating the patient from the ward. So by using all these things, we do the we repeat the blood groups and cross-matching to identify the mistake where we have done in the ABO incompatible transfusion reaction. Now we are coming to the next very commonest transfusion reaction, which is called the febrile non-hemolytic transfusion reaction. Now, by the name, you can see there is a term called non-hemolytic. Now, you must understand that there is no hemolysis. If there is no hemolysis means there is no incompatible red cell reaction. Did you get that point? Now, hemolytic reactions, whatever the cause, whether it is ABO, minor blood group systems, always hemolysis are there. Incompatible red cells transfusion lead to the hemolysis. Now, this is non-hemolytic reaction. That means there is no red cell incompatibility. Then what should be the cause? That is due to the incompatibility of the platelet or white cells antigen with the recipient. Sometimes recipient may have antibody against the donor platelet or white cells. You know that white cells are having so many antigens, HLA antigen, human leukocytic antigens, and white cell specific antigens on the white cell of the donor. Platelet also having some ABO antibodies, ABO antigens, and HLA antigens and platelet specific antigens. You know that if we expose to any foreign antigen, we may develop antibody against these antigens present on the platelet or white cells. So this is common in multiple transfusions and multiple pregnancies. So transfusion dependent patients or multiparous women are always getting exposed to the donor platelets and donor white cells. Like development of the red cell antibodies, they can develop antibody against the platelet antigens and white cells antigens. So when we transfuse any blood pack containing donor platelet or donor white cells, whereas patient is having the appropriate antibodies which can react with those antigens, there will be a reaction. Now this reaction always not having any hemolysis because no red cell incompatibility to get the hemolysis. So remember that non-hemolytic transfusion reactions are mainly due to the platelet and white cell antigen antibody reaction. Clinical features are fever. Always antigen antibody reactions will lead to the fever with the chills and rigors. That is why it is called febrile non-hemolytic transfusion reactions, as it is not due to the red cell incompatibility. So they can get nausea, vomiting, hypotension, and shock. Now, if you are working in a thalassaemic ward, where you get most of the transfusion dependent patients, they have developed antibody against platelet and white cell antigens. And when we transfused cross-match compatible red cells, still there is a chance of getting febrile non-hemolytic transfusion reactions. So management, if the reaction is very mild, you can slow down the infusion and see whether the fever and other chills and rigors get subsided. If it is not, you can give any antipyretics like paracetamol, not aspirin, no NSAID. If it is very severe, you have to stop the transfusion and assess the patient, give antipyretics and necessary symptomatic treatments. Now, if there is now this is sometimes a common problem in transfusion dependent patients. When we transfuse compatible red cells, they are more prone to get febrile non-hemolytic transfusion reactions as they have developed antibodies to by platelets and white cells. Now, this can't be prevented by doing abioglutinarage or cross-matching of the blood, because these reactions are not due to the red cell incompatibility. So if you want to prevent that, either you have to give leukoreduced, that means white cells removed blood and blood components to prevent this type of reaction. Or we can give washed cells. Now we can wash the red cells to remove white cells and white cell debris to prevent the febrile non-hemolytic reactions. So here we have two main blood components. Leukoreduced means we have removed 70 to 80% of white cells from the red cell pack. Now this will be sufficient enough to prevent febrile non-hemolytic transfusion reactions in most of the transfusion dependent patients. Sometimes their antibody titer and potency are very high. They can develop febrile non-hemolytic reaction even for the leukoreduced blood, in which 70 to 80% white cells are removed. The alternative is the leukodepleted blood. In the leukodepleted blood, we have removed 100% of white cells, more than 99.9% of white cells. So any patient developing febrile non-hemolytic reactions, even for the leukoreduced blood, you can give leukodepleted blood in which white cells are 99.9% removed from these blood components. If these two components are not available, we can wash the blood pack with the normal saline to remove the white cells. There we can achieve about 70 to 80% of white cell reduction. Right, now we are coming to the another common reaction, which is called allergic or anaphylactic reactions. So allergic reaction is the hypersensitivity reaction in the blood transfusion, very mild form. They can get urticarial rash. Now here you can see the urticarial rash or hives and with the itching. So this is mainly due to the hypersensitivity to plasma proteins in the donor pack. Like now we know that some people are hypersensitive to some proteins, cow's protein, shellfish protein, like that. So patient can develop hypersensitivity reaction to some plasma protein from the donors. So when they get exposed to these plasma proteins from the blood in the blood pack, they may develop allergic reaction. Mild form is the urticarial rash with itching. Severe form, they can go for the anaphylactic reactions, anaphylactoid reaction. So this again common with the patients with having repeated plasma component therapies. You know, sometimes we are transfusing FFP or cryoprecipitate for the patients very frequently. Now, if the patient is hemophilic patient, they are always receiving cryoprecipitate or FFP as the treatment of bleeding in the hemophiliac patients. So they have got hypersensitivity to some plasma proteins. So in that case, they are very prone to get this type of reactions, either urticarial rash or anaphylactic reactions. So the other common features associated with the allergic reactions are the cough, respiratory distress. They can get the bronchospasms with laryngeal edema. They can get severe dyspnea due to the bronchospasm with cyanosis. They can have nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. Sometimes they can get the circulatory collapse with hypotension and shock. So as a result of anaphylactic reactions, if you are not managed the patients accurately on time, they can die due to the severe hypotensive shock, anaphylactic shock. So you must be able to manage anaphylactic shock when the patient is having anaphylactic reactions. So as in the management, mild allergic reactions will respond to any form of antihistamines. You can give chlorpheniramine or Phenergan. Now, if the patient is having any severe form of anaphylactoid reaction, you have to stop the transfusion immediately. You have to clear the airway and you have to go give the cardiovascular management. You may have to go for the adrenaline, antihistamine. Sometimes you have to do the bronchodilators with oxygen. And if the patient is having severe hypotension, you have to treat the hypotension. And you can try with the steroids like hydrocortisone. So you know how to manage anaphylactic reactions. So you have to apply the same thing here if the patient has developed anaphylactic reactions to the blood component treatment therapies. Then I am coming to a very not so common, very rarely we see that. That doesn't mean this is rare, but most of time it is underdiagnosed. Transfusion related acute lung injury, TRALI. Because most of our people are not aware of this reaction, so they will not detect the TRALI properly because there are other overlapping clinical features with the TRALI like ARDS. So they may think that this may be due to the acute respiratory distress syndrome. And sometimes they can get pulmonary hypertension with severe dyspnea. So this is here, they present as pulmonary edema with acute respiratory insufficiency. Usually this reaction will appear within first 1 to 6 hours of the transfusion. So usually within first 1 to 2 hours. Now, this is mainly due to the transfusion of plasma containing blood components like whole blood, packed red cells, FFP, cryoprecipitate, like that. So, patient, the chance of getting reaction is common with the transfusion of plasma containing blood components. Now, clinical features, the patient can get the symptoms and signs of acute respiratory distress. Patient will get the high temperature with chills and rigors. Patient will get dyspnea. They can get non-productive. Sometimes they can get the productive cough. Patient will complain of chest pain. They can have the bilateral pulmonary edema. You can hear the lung signs like crepitations and sometimes bronchi. The patient will get cyanosis due to the poor oxygen perfusion of the lungs, and patient may get hypotension, and chest X-ray is highly diagnostic. They can get bilateral pulmonary infiltrates in both hilar region of the lung channels. Now this is the picture or X-ray picture of the X-rays, two X-rays in TRALI. This is a mild case. You can see the bilateral pulmonary infiltrates in both lung hilar regions. And this is an advanced case. All lung fields are involved in the congestions like that. So this is mainly due to, if we talk about the pathophysiology, this is very much complicated thing. Now there should be two things should be fulfilled to get the TRALI. First thing is patient should get some priming event in the patient, like surgeries, incompatible blood transfusion, severe bleeding, or acute lung problems. So they can get priming of the neutrophils, patient's neutrophils, recipient neutrophils in the pulmonary vasculature. Then when they receive blood component with plasma containing anti-neutrophil antibodies. So I don't know whether you can understand that patient is having a condition where patient's neutrophils get primed in the pulmonary vasculature due to the patient's clinical problem. Then patient will receive donor blood containing anti-neutrophil antibodies. That means antibodies which can react with the patient's neutrophils. Now, these antibodies will react with the neutrophils primed in the pulmonary vessels, leading to release of various active substances which can damage the pulmonary endothelium, and lot of fluids in the pulmonary vascular compartment will be leaked out to the alveolar spaces, leading to fluids in the alveoli and interstitial spaces. So this is the pathophysiology of TRALI. So this mainly due to the antibodies present in the donor blood, which can react with the recipient's neutrophils, which are primed in the pulmonary vessels. So that is the main pathophysiology. And in the management, no specific treatment for that. Only we can give the respiratory support with oxygen. So this is self-limiting. With the time, patient will get resolving of the lung problems. Till that, we have to assist the patient with adequate respiratory support with oxygen. Sometimes patient may require mechanical ventilation. So we have to continue the respiratory support with oxygen until the patient's lungs are resolved with the primary problem. Then patient will survive. So if we miss the diagnosis and miss the management, around 60 to 65% of mortality rate is there. Once we identified and act on time in the management, we can save most of patients who are dying due to the TRALI problem. That is why it is very important to identify these things and manage properly according to the clinical feature. Now, again, we are coming to another complicated transfusion reactions, that is transfusion associated graft versus host disease. Now, why we are calling it as transfusion associated? There is another one which is called transplant associated. Now, in the transplant, organ or bone marrow transplantation, patients can get graft versus host disease. Again, due to the transfusion itself, they can get graft versus host disease. That is why, to differentiate these two, we called this as transfusion associated graft versus host disease. Now, transfusion associated GVHD is more complicated and more dangerous than transplant associated GVHD, because transplant associated GVHD can be properly managed and can prevent the death. But transfusion associated GVHD is very, very fatal, and the mortality rate is around 90%. And this is very, very rare. This can be seen in severely immunocompromised patients. So the next thing is in immunocompetent patients also can get transfusion associated graft versus host disease if they receive blood from the blood relatives. I will explain later. The clinical features: patient can get fever, diffuse erythematous rash, maculopapular rash, and bullae eruptions. Patient can get profuse diarrhea. Patient will have lymphadenopathy, acute hepatitis, and pancytopenia. As a result of this pancytopenia and other complications, most of time patient may die. Now these are the clinical features. Now you can see inflammation of the skin, erythematous rash, bullae eruptions, and this is a very critical condition to get the graft versus host disease. So just I will explain the pathophysiology again in briefly. Now, if their immune system is not enough to knock off the foreign fight with the foreign antigens and protect the recipient, they are more prone to get graft versus host disease. Now they are immunocompetent, their immune system is not good enough to knock off the donor white lymphocytes present in the donor blood. Now this is mainly due to the engraftment of the viable donor lymphocytes in the recipient bone marrow. So there should be viable lymphocytes which are immunologically incompatible with the donor, and donor will receive these viable lymphocytes, and these lymphocytes will get engrafted in the bone marrow of the recipient. Usually, in a patient who is immunocompetent, immune system is okay, these viable lymphocytes will be removed from the circulation after destruction by the immune system. Now, our immune system is there to look after these foreign lymphocytes. Before they get engrafted in the bone marrow, they will immunologically destroy them. But if their immune system is not fully working, so these lymphocytes can get escaped through the immune system of the recipient and will travel to the bone marrow, and these lymphocytes get engrafted and multiply. Then multiplying donor lymphocytes which are immunocompetent can act against the donor tissues, host tissues, as they are immunologically incompatible. So this is the reason for the graft versus host disease. Now, for the immunocompetent patients, their immune system is okay. If they are receiving blood from the first degree or second degree relatives, there is a chance of getting share in HLA haplotypes. You know that we are having 2 HLA haplotypes. So if there is a familial relationship, some donors can have homozygous HLA haplotype which is present in the recipient white cells. Now, if there is a share in HLA haplotypes, the recipient can't identify these donor lymphocytes as foreign, so these white cells get engrafted in the bone marrow and multiply. But donor lymphocytes, which are multiplying in the recipient bone marrow, will identify the host tissues as foreign tissues. They will destroy these foreign tissues. Especially they will attack rapidly proliferating tissues like liver, skin, gut, and bone marrow. So they can get severe hepatitis, bloody mucus diarrhea, skin problems, and severe pancytopenia. As a result of that, patient may die. So for the graft versus host disease, no, there is no specific therapy. We can go for the supportive treatments only. So prevention is now we can't, though we can't treat the graft versus host disease, we can prevent graft versus host disease 100% by giving irradiated blood components to the recipients who are prone to get graft versus host disease. So the people who are prone to get graft versus host disease is one category is immuno-incompetent patients. So all immuno-incompetent patients or patients who are receiving immunosuppressive drugs should receive irradiated blood components. Now with the irradiation, we attack the nuclear genomic material of the lymphocytes and they will not multiply though they engraft in the recipient's bone marrow. So irradiation will prevent the multiplication of viable lymphocytes in the donor bone marrow. So recipient's bone marrow. So recipient will not get graft versus host disease due to the transfusion of irradiated blood. The next thing is any patient receiving blood from the blood relatives, from other parents' blood, siblings' blood, the blood from the son, the children. Parents should not receive blood from the children because they may share actually haplotypes among them, and there is a chance of getting graft versus host disease. Any patient receiving blood from the blood relatives again should receive irradiated blood to prevent the graft versus host disease. Now we are coming to the non-immunological reactions. The commonest one is the circulatory overload. Now this can be due to the transfusion of large volume blood or transfusion of or patient receiving rapid transfusions. In these both conditions, patient can get circulatory overload. So if the patient is having pre-existing cardiopulmonary diseases or chronic anemia, they are more prone to get circulatory overload. So heart failure, pulmonary edema are the clinical features of circulatory overload. Usually patients with chronic anemia, we know that they are having hyperdynamic circulations. Sometimes they may get left ventricular failure. In that case, if you transfuse too much blood, or too rapid blood transfusions, they can easily go into heart failure. To avoid that, we have to transfuse small blood transfusions, multiple repeated small volume blood transfusions until they get the correction of anemia. So you have to be very careful if the patient is already in heart failure. They can die due to the heart failure after receiving large amount of blood. Now, if you have to give blood in the or to a patient who is already having heart failure, you can transfuse blood transfusions under diuretic cover. Either you have to give diuretics before the transfusion to get rid of the excess fluid, or you can give diuretics mid transfusion to get rid of the excess fluid, and you can complete the transfusion. So multiple small volume divided doses will be helpful for this type of patients. The next problem is patient can get hypothermia. You know blood is stored in the refrigerators at 4 centigrade degrees. So if you just collect blood from the blood bank and immediately transfuse to the patients, that blood temperature will be around 4 to 7 or 8 degrees centigrade degrees. If you are giving large amount of blood to this any patient may get severe hypothermia with chills and rigors. So another thing is that can induce the coagulopathy, and to prevent hypothermic attack in a patient who is receiving large volume of refrigerated blood, cold blood, you can use a controlled blood warmer. Now there are a special machine which is called blood warmer. You have to transfuse the blood through this warmer ultimately patient will receive only 37 warm blood, not the cold blood. So any patient who is having hypothermia, or if you are transfusing large amount, rapid transfusions, you have to be very careful about hypothermia. If they have coagulopathy, this hypothermia may lead to severe coagulopathy, leading to severe bleeding. So in that type of patient, other uh, kind of patients who are more prone to get hypothermia due to blood transfusions are the small neonates and infants, because they are highly sensitive to hypothermia. And you are transfusing, if you are transfusing uh, refrigerated blood in large volume, especially in exchange transfusions, you have to be very careful. Uh, if they want large amount of blood in a rapid way, you have to use the blood pump. The next common transfusion non-immunological reaction is iron overload. You know that most of the transfusion dependent patients are receiving multiple blood transfusions frequently, and one pack of red cell will contain 250 milligram of iron. With each transfusion of each blood pack, they get additional 250 milligram of ions. The excretion of iron through the human bodies is very difficult, and this iron can get deposited in various parenchymal tissues, leading to tissue damage, organ damage. So complications like cardiac dysfunction, hepatic dysfunction, pancreatic fibrosis, endocrine dysfunctions, delayed sexual development, these are mainly due to the deposition of iron, excess iron in these parenchymal tissues. So treatment is you have to do the chelation with either parenteral or oral. So there are desferrioxamine and debripone are available. So you can go for the iron chelation to get rid of this excess iron from the transfusion dependent patients. So this is a common problem in thalassaemic patients. They are receiving multiple blood transfusions and they can get iron overload. Before the widely use of iron chelation, most of the patients died due to the complication of iron overload in their second or third decade. Now, with the good iron chelation, they are living up to fourth or fifth decades without any problem. The next common transfusion reaction is the citrate toxicity. You know that we collect blood into an anticoagulant preservative solution. Donor blood will contain this anticoagulant preservative solution. Here we use the citrate as an anticoagulant to prevent the coagulation of the blood collected from the donor. So this citrate will be in the plasma component. If anyone receiving large volume of plasma can get large dose of citrate. Now this citrate can chelate the ionized calcium. Usually when we get citrate, if our liver is okay, liver can metabolite most of the citrate without getting ionization of the calcium. But if they are in liver failure or liver diseases, this metabolism of the citrate will get affected. So most of the citrate get accumulated in the circulation, leading to the ionization of ionized calcium, chelation of the ionized calcium, and they can get hypocalcemia. So clinical feature, they can get circummoral and other paresthesias. Sometimes they can get involuntary twitching and tetany. Sometimes they can get cardiac arrhythmias. So if any patient who is having liver diseases, receiving large volume of plasma or blood components contained in plasma and citrate, you have to be very careful. So this is a common problem in massive transfusions. transfusion of more than 5, 6, 7, 8 units in a short period, they can get hypocalcemic changes if they are already having liver problems. So this is the most common problem in cirrhosis patients coming with bouts of bleeding from the esophageal varices. So we have to monitor these patients for hypocalcemia and correct with calcium doses to prevent the cardiac arrhythmias and other clinical problems. So then another problem in the transfusion is hyperkalemia. You know, most of the potassium are in the cells, not in the plasma component. When there is excessive red cell lysis in the donor pack, this excessive potassium will be released into the plasma component. So if you transfuse hemolyzed blood pack, patient can get large dose of potassium through that blood transfusion. So this is a problem when we store the blood. If we are not storing the blood according to their optimum storage condition. Usually we store blood pack around 35 days in a refrigerator where the temperature is around 4 centigrade degrees. If the temperature goes above 10 degrees at any moment, and if the blood pack kept at that temperature for several hours, there is a tendency of damage in the red cells in the blood pack, releasing most of the potassium into the plasma component. Or if you allow the blood pack to get frozen, now you know that we can't freeze red cells. If you are freezing red cells, these red cells get lysed, releasing the potassium. Or if you warm the blood pack above 40 degrees, 40, 50 degrees, again there is a chance of damage in the red cell membrane, leading to the hyperkalemia. So due to any reason, if you transfused hemolyzed blood, patient can get hyperkalemia. So this condition will lead to severe cardiac arrhythmias and cardiac arrest. Most of the time, if they receive high dose of potassium to the hemolyzed blood in a short period, they can die due to the cardiac arrest. So I have one experience when a patient needs blood transfusion in a theater. The anesthetist asked the nurse to warm the blood pack before it transfused because they want to prevent the hypothermia. Hypothermia can lead to severe coagulopathy and bleeding disorders. So anesthetist wanted to warm the blood pack, asked the nurse to warm it, and our nurse asked one of the minor staff member to bring warm water. That person brought boiling water bowl, and blood pack was put into the boiling water, and most of the red cell got damaged and potassium released in the plasma. Patient received this hemolyzed blood pack during the surgery. Within few minutes, patient got the cardiac arrest and died. Ultimately, we found that no intact red cell in the red cell pack, all red cell got damaged, hemolyzed, and patient died due to the severe hyperkalemia. So be careful when you are taking the blood pack from the blood bank and keeping in the ward for many hours without transfusion to the patient. So within half an hour after collection from the blood bank, you have to start the transfusion and you have to complete within 4 hours. Otherwise, with the time, there is a more chance to get potassium released into the plasma and patient may get hyperkalemia. So be very careful when you are transfusing blood to the patients not to cause any of these reactions to the patient. Again, now this is a very common in large volume of all the blood, hemolyzed blood transfusions. Now I have already discussed warming and freezing is another problem in the hyperkalemic patients receiving blood transfusions. So patient can die due to cardiac arrest. Now, again, another complication is transfusion transmissible infections. Now, I have given you a list of diseases which are viruses, bacteria, protozoa, so and prions. So these organisms can transmitted to the recipient from with the donor blood. So one thing is common one, HIV 1 and 2, hepatitis B virus, hepatitis A virus, hepatitis C virus, hepatitis D virus, syphilis, malaria, Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus, HTLV 1 and 2, HGV, also called GB virus, herpes G virus, TTV, Sen virus, human herpes virus 8, human papilloma virus B19, West Nile virus, variants of CJD, that is a prime disease, Chagas, babesiosis, leishmaniasis, toxoplasmosis, Lyme disease. So these are the some of them are protozoal infections. So I can give more if you want. So there are possibility of transmitting these microorganisms from the donor to the recipient through the blood. So the dangerous one are the virus disease, HIV 1 and 2, Hep B, Hep C, because no treatment for these viral infections. So possibilities there. So you have to be very careful not to transfuse blood containing any of these microorganisms. So main prevention is screening the donors and screening the blood for all these infections to find out contaminated blood and to remove them. So as you know, we can't do the screening of all of these infections in our country. Only some infections are prevalent in our country, not all infections. So we are not worried about the infections in our country. So we have 5 mandatory screening systems for the collected donor blood. That is for the HIV 1 and 2, Hep B, hepatitis C virus, syphilis, and malaria. Unless do the screening test and found to be negative, no donor blood will be transfused to recipients in any case. Under any circumstance, we are not transfusing blood without screening for these 5 mandatory tests. So still there is a chance of getting other infections which are not screened. So that can't be prevented. Only can be prevented by limiting the transfusions only for the real indications. Right. So prevention is one is donor selection and counseling. Before we select the donors for the blood collection, we ask social and medical history, and we examine the donors to exclude the possibility of having these any of infections. Then after collection of the blood, we do the screening test for these infections, and any blood found to be positive will be discarded, and only blood which are found to be negative will be released for the patients. Right. Now, precautions to avoid transfusion reactions. One thing is avoidance of the clerical errors. Now, I am summarizing what I have told you so far. So, ultimately, you must learn how to avoid these transfusion reactions. Prevention is better than cure. So, prevention is the best thing in the transfusion reactions. First thing is avoidance of the clerical errors, misidentification of the patient, drawing the sample from the wrong patients, wrongly labeled samples, and transfusion of wrong blood back to the wrong patient. So those things happen in the ward level. So when you are working in a ward, you have to be very careful to avoid this type of clerical errors. So proper identification, correctly labeled samples. So I have already explained. Then next thing is, a very important thing is avoid unnecessary blood transfusion. There should be clear-cut indications for the blood transfusions, because blood transfusion carries so many risks. Most of them are life-threatening. So if you have transfused blood unnecessarily to a patient who can survive without any blood transfusions, will die due to the adverse transfusion reaction. So your aim should be targeted to identify the patients who are really need blood transfusion. So avoid unnecessary blood transfusion as much as possible. So that is the end. If you have any questions, I am happy to answer you.
Thank you, Dr. Karunadipati, for that very comprehensive lecture. Uh, so I think usually students used to put questions in the chat. Yeah, I don't know whether you can see any. Sometimes it's in your personal chat. Can you see?
Yes, I can see some. Why we don't introduce serial number sticker for as a tag in patient's hand when the time we withdrawing blood? It can prevent misidentification. Yes, this practice is done in most of the developed countries. So they use a barcode tag in the patient's hand. What they do is they read it with the barcode reader and generate a barcode label will be pasted on the request form and the blood sample. Now there should be an internet connection, IT connection with the blood bank. So once we receive that, we read the blood, we read this label of the blood sample and the request form with the barcode reader that can be entered into the blood bank IT system. Then once we cross match the blood pack, we have the barcode label on the blood pack also that will be read and put into the patient's details. So when we release this blood pack, what they can do is they can just read with the barcode reader that of the blood pack and the label of the tag. Then they can identify whether it is correct blood pack or wrong. Not. Still, our systems are not developed into that level. So until we get such system, we have to be very careful identifying the patients and blood packs before we transfuse. So still we have to do it manually. I don't know whether it is. You may type right. So if we say cross-matching, that is look for ABO incompatibility, is it? Yes, yes. Now, not the cross-matching. Now, to avoid the ABO incompatibility, we are not doing the cross-matching. What we do is, we check the blood group of the patient, we get the correct ABO blood group, and we have the labeled donor pack in our stock. So what we do is we select the group specific blood pack from our stock. Now, after collection of the donor pack, always we do the group in RH and we label the blood pack according to their ABO group. And we keep them in the shelves of refrigerators according to their ABO groups. So what we do is we check the blood group of the patient and correct blood group pack will be selected from the donor stock. Now that is for the ABO incompatibility. The cross-matching is to identify the minor blood group incompatibility, because for the minor blood group incompatibility, we are not grouping the grouping of the minor blood group of the recipient or patient, because our facilities are not so heavy and there are more than 36 minor blood group now as you know there are 36 blood group systems, and some blood group systems are having more than 50-60 antigens. So practically it is very impossible even for a developed country to identify all the minor group and label them in the blood pack. So what we do is cross-matching is targeted to identify the minor blood group incompatibilities. As I told you earlier, if the recipient is having antibodies only, they will develop the reaction to the minor blood group antigens, because these are immune antibodies. You should have got exposed to the real red cell minor blood group antigens to develop the antibodies. If there is no history of previous transfusion or pregnancies, you will never have minor blood group antibodies. Now, if you have the minor blood group antibodies, when we do the cross matching, if that donor pack is having the corresponding antigen only, that will be incompatible. So as far as it is compatible, that means recipient is not having any antibody which can react with the donor red cell antigen of that particular donor. So safely that blood can be transfused to the recipient. So ABO incompatibility, mainly our blood group checking. Still with the cross matching, we can identify the ABO incompatibility. When we mix ABO incompatible blood, immediately you will get the incompatible results. So that's why I told you ABO now for the cross match blood, there is no reason to get incompatible transfusion if we do it properly. So that is why I told you that there are two errors, in technical errors. Either your group is wrong or cross matching is wrong. There is a chance to get the incompatible reaction. Or if you have selected the wrong sample, blood will be compatible for that wrong sample, but not for the real patient. Ultimately, blood cross-match compatible for the wrong samples will be transfused to the correct patient who is not belong to that sample. So that is how we get the ABO incompatible reactions. Is there a procedure to inform the donors if they have got any of the 5 infections? Yes. Always we get down the donor and inform they are having this type of. Now we have to maintain the privacy and secrecy, especially for the HIV infections. We can't divulge this information to the third parties. So other thing is, when we explain if the donor is positive for HIV, that will be a mess. So no one is expecting to hear that I am HIV positive. So we have to handle it tactfully, and we inform these problems to the donor. And if they have positive for HIV, we refer them to the anti-STDV clinic for further management. And if they have got HBV, hepatitis B or C virus, we refer them to the virologist for further management. So that service is done for the donors from the blood bank. My cursor is not working properly. Right.
Are there any other questions? Students can
There are a
unmute
lot
now.
of questions. I will try if you have the time.
Right.
Okay. What is difference between DT and cross matching? Actually, DT is direct test. Earlier, we used that technique. Direct test means just mixing the patient sample with the donor pack. That is why it is called DT. Now that term is out. What we do is we are doing the cross matching. The correct term is the cross matching or pre-transfusion compatibility testing. So we do the compatibility testing before the transfusion. So the correct term is pre-transfusion compatibility testing or cross matching. DT is a wrong terminology. Nowadays we are not using DT, though it is commonly used. The next questions. Sir, can you repeat transfusion associated graft versus host disease? Yeah, I will try to explain briefly. So graft versus host disease is, you can understand by the name, graft. Graft means what we have given. Host means who had received it. Patient, recipient. So graft is the donor. Now donor is working against the recipient, host. How it happens is, we know that lymphocytes can multiply in the bone marrow if they received if they receive viable lymphocytes through the blood transfusions. They can get engrafted in the bone marrow and multiply. Usually, if our immune system is good, our immune system can prevent the engraftment of the viable lymphocytes, and all the lymphocytes will be killed in the circulation. Now, if the immune system is not okay, that means if the immune system is incompetent, our immune system can't fight with the donor lymphocytes. Ultimately, these lymphocytes will go into the bone marrow and get engrafted there. So once the lymphocyte get engrafted in the bone marrow, they will multiply. Now, if the donor and recipient are immunologically incompatible, that means we know that HLA antigen antibody reaction will be there. So if we have same HLA antigens from the both donor and the recipient, there will be any problem. Now, if we have foreign HLA antigen in the host tissues, according to the graft, the lymphocyte will attack the host tissues. So this is mainly due to the HLA disparity between the donor and the recipient. Recipient has received some HLA mismatched lymphocytes from the donor, which can't be prevented by the recipient's immune system because it is weak. Ultimately, these lymphocytes will multiply and mount an immune response, destructive immune response against the host tissues. That is the one. Now, with the immunocompetent patients, this can happen if they receive blood from the blood relatives, because blood relatives can have, now anyone can have HLA haplotypes, 2 HLA haplotypes. Now, if any donor is having only one HLA haplotype, sharing HLA haplotype, both HLA haplotypes are same, recipient may have one of them and different disparity of with another HLA pairs of antigens. Recipient will not identify the donor lymphocytes as foreign because donor lymphocytes are having only HLA antigens which are present in the recipients. But HLA, the lymphocytes of the donor is will identify the recipient tissues as foreign because host is having different foreign antigen comparing to the donor HLA type. Now, this and lymphocytes can mount an immune response against the host tissues. I don't know whether you can understand with this brief explanation. I can explain if time permits further. Oh, is it okay? Ultimately, these lymphocytes will multiply and destroy the rapidly proliferating tissues like gut, skin, bone marrow, liver, lead into severe acute hepatitis, pancytopenia, and profuse blood and mucus diarrhea. So ultimately, patient will die. So only way to prevent it is the destruction of the proliferative ability of the lymphocytes by exposing them to the gamma radiations. Once they get exposed to the gamma radiations, they can't multiply. So though recipient is receiving irradiated lymphocytes, they may get engrafted in the bone marrow, but they are not capable of multiplying in the bone marrow, and there won't be any result of graft versus host disease. So after investigation of post-transfusion sample, if report says this is due to transfusion of wrong blood pack, what happens to the HO? Now that is a problem. All the transfusion reactions should be informed to the blood bank, and we collect these informations island-wide, and we analyze them and see what are the common problems in the blood transfusion, errors in the blood transfusion practice. So we use these informations to develop and improve our service in the blood transfusion practice. So if you have given a wrong blood pack to the patients, so there should be a the root cause for that. Either you were not able to identify, or you were not in a position to do it properly. So ultimately, our aim is to identify the root cause and address it to prevent and to prevent the further occurrence of the same incident. Now, our side is that we are using this information to improve our service and not to charge or to take disciplinary action against anyone. So we are not complaining to the ministry level or director that you have done a wrong thing, but ward level, if the patient or patient's relatives goes against you to complain to the director or administration or to the ministry or even to the courts, that is another problem. So that can't be stopped by to us. So we never take any disciplinary actions against these things. We use those informations only to improve our service. So you have to be very careful, because sometimes the patients and patient relatives can complain to the ministry for inquiries. So in that case, if you have done a mistake, so you will be vulnerable. So be careful when you are dealing with blood transfusions. So that's why I told you, try to minimize inappropriate blood transfusion as far as possible. If we say cross-matching, look for ABO incompatibility. No, not only ABO incompatibility, just doing grouping RH of the recipient and selecting the correct blood pack from the stock is necessary just to prevent ABO incompatibility. Because blood pack is correctly labeled, we are double checking that, and we make sure that our blood pack group is correct. And once we receive the blood sample from the recipient, we just check the group. If the patient is A positive, we select A positive blood pack from our stock. That is enough for the ABO incompatibility. Just giving group specific. If group specific is not available, we can go for ABO compatible blood. Now, O blood can be given to any blood group patients according to the universal donor recipient theory. So unless we are going against this, we will never get a problem. So cross-matching is mainly targeted to detect minor blood group incompatibilities, which is not life-threatening. So ABO incompatibilities always carries life-threatening risk. Just remember that, just to identify the patient correctly, collect the sample from the correct patient, label the sample correctly, and once you receive the blood pack for the transfusion, to identify the blood pack properly and recipient properly before you transfer. So we encourage you to do the double checking to prevent this type of errors. Now, if you have done a mistake, if you ask one of your colleagues or one of your nurse to check it to identify whether you have done a mistake, that is most encourageable thing. So we advise always go for the double checking before you transfuse blood. Is there a procedure to inform? Yes, we are informing to the donor. What is difference between DT and, yes, I have explained. Massive transfusion. What precautions should we take to avoid transfusion reactions in emergency settings? Yes, massive transfusion is replacement of total blood volume within 24 hours. Now, you can calculate the total blood volume. We are having 70 ml per kg blood volume. So multiply by the weight, then you can assess your total blood volume. If you are losing this total blood volume within 24 hours, that is the massive bleeding. Now, massive bleeding can be managed by doing a massive transfusion protocol. So what we do is we replace now always. What is the problem with the blood loss? Patient can go for acute shock and delayed late shock. Now, acute shock patient, if the patient is going for an acute shock phase, you should prevent patient going into the shock phase. If the patient is in the acute shock phase, your aim should be to prevent them going for the chronic shock phase. Because if the patient get acute shock phase, still we have a chance to prevent brain damages. You know that our brain cells can't survive more than few minutes without oxygen. So our aim is to correct the blood loss as soon as possible to maximize the oxygen supply to the brain tissues. Otherwise, patient get permanent brain damage. That is the commonest thing in most of the road traffic accidents. Once they get into the hospital, they have bled a lot and they have got the cerebral hypoxia and massive destruction to the cerebral tissues. So once you see a patient who has bled a lot, your immediate target is to correct the blood volume. Now there is a time gap between the collection of the blood from the cross-match blood from the blood bank and transfusion. That period is very, very critical. So once you detect any patient has bled a lot, immediately try to resuscitate the patient with any sort of IV isotonic solution to expand the volume, to correct the cerebral hypoxia till you reach to the blood supply. So you don't have excuse to tell that there was a delay in the blood supply, blood provision to the patient, but still you can correct the blood loss, blood volume by giving IV isotonic solutions. But that is not enough further. If the patient is still bleeding, patient is losing red cells, by increasing the volume itself will not be helpful to prevent the cerebral hypoxia. There you have to give the red cells. Try to get immediately blood from the blood bank. If there is a delay in the procedures, blood group in RH and cross-matching, just request uncross-match blood. Or if there is a delay for the group in RH, just request uncross-match O positive blood. Immediately, within few minutes, you can get uncross-match O positive blood from any blood bank. So your target is to prevent cerebral hypoxia, cerebral damage by resuscitating the patient with adequate fluid as well as red cells. Right. There are some more. What do we next when patient starts a reaction against the blood pack, which we have given correctly? Do we do cross-match again and give another? Yes. Now, if the patient has developed a reaction, we have to investigate what was the reason for the reaction. Unless we identify the reason, it is very dangerous to give blood. Because if the patient's previous group is the transfused blood group is wrong, we will give the same group blood again and again, risking the patient's life. So immediately we have to exclude any febrile reactions until prove otherwise. All the febrile reactions should be treated and managed as acute hemolytic reaction. Remember that throughout your career. Any febrile reactions until prove otherwise, you have to manage as acute hemolytic reaction, because that is the dangerous thing and preventable thing. So if any patient is having ABO incompatible reaction, immediately inform the blood bank, send the blood pack and send a post-transfusion sample. In few minutes, they will detect whether it is due to the major group incompatibility or not. If it is not due to the major group incompatibility, no problem of providing the same group blood. But if there is a wrong group blood transfusion, we have to identify the correct blood group and we can provide blood according to the patient's correct group. So immediately inform the blood bank and have a discussion, chat with the blood bank if you need further blood transfusion. Get the help from them to prevent any further reactions and to save the life. There is another question: why is recent travel history is questioned in the form? Now you know that travel history is very important in few aspects. In some countries, some infections are more prevalent, though these infections may not be seen in our country. Suppose that patient has recently visited to Japan or some far east countries, there the HTLV 1 and 2 infections are more common. So they may have got infected with them, and once we collect the blood, that may be transfused to the patient. Other thing is, now when a person going to some countries like Taiwan, Thailand, Vietnam, sorry, not Vietnam, Malaysia. So the free sex is very common, and they can get exposed to the HIV virus or STD, sexually transmitted infections. Because if they have gone alone for a short period to enjoy the trip, they may have these exposures. Once they come back, without knowing that, we may collect blood and transfuse. Now, with our experience, worldwide data shows that those type of travel histories can lead to some infection transmissions, like especially HIV 1 and 2. Nowadays, malaria is a problem. Now we have imported malaria from most of the malarial endemic countries. Recently, we have identified the patient who had got malarial parasite through the blood transfusions. Now we have restricted collection of blood those who have returned from malarial endemic countries. So like that, there is a high chance of having some transfusion transmissible infections in these donors. So we allow them to have a reasonable time gap, like 3 months, 6 months, or 1 year. So after that, they are moved. Next thing is, this time gap is very important. Now, if you know that once a person exposed to HIV infections, today, if a person exposed to HIV infection, tomorrow he will be negative for all our screening tests. Why? There is a window period. So during this window period, all that person will be negative. And once we collect blood, then if we find that negative, that blood will be automatically transfused to the recipient. But if we know that if the donor is having a high risk behavior or high chance of having these infections, we allow them to stay for a reasonable time to overcome the window period, and we can get them and we can collect the blood and test them. So there is a time gap always in the window period to be positive for the infection. So these are the main reasons for the asking the travel history. So with the knowledge of these TTI infections, we can handle these donors very well. Yes, is it due to malaria? Yes, malaria is one of the problem I saw later. So that is another problem. Malaria, because of now we have eradicated our endemic malarial situation, but we are having imported cases. That is why we recently decided to defer the not take donors who are coming for the malarial endemic countries for a reasonable period. Not only that, TTI infections and various things are in the picture. Any other questions? So all these are finished. I don't know whether my explanation of in this brief explanation graft versus host disease, that is a very complicated thing. It may take, now if I do a graft versus host disease lecture, it is another 1 hour lecture. I don't know whether I can explain everything in few minutes. Any more questions, or are you happy?
Sir, I have a question.
Yes.
Sir, why donors are not allowed, if the donor is on steroids and they are not allowed to...
Steroids.
Yes.
Now, one thing is, here we have to think 2 aspects. One thing is, why this donor is getting steroids. There should be some disease, no? That disease itself may not allow the donor to donate blood. Other thing is, any donor should be free from any medication at least for 72 hours, 3 days. Because some drugs can do harm to the recipients, and some drugs, steroids, some patients may get steroids for some chronic diseases, no? So as it is immunosuppressive, some patients are not, some donors are with steroids are not fit enough to donate blood. So that is why taking any medication within 72 hours, we are not accepting. Even except simple analgesic, like taking for just a mild headache or like that. But for the NSAID, including aspirin, if they just take as a painkiller, we can take, but when we use the platelet prepared from donors, we are not using this platelet because NSAID are antiplatelet drugs. So this platelet will be useless. So other than that, any the usual mild analgesics taken for simple causes, simple illnesses, all the donors will not be bled in the blood banks. Any question? Any other questions?
Very holiday. So Karnadipati on
Yeah.
behalf of PIMSA
Yes.
for delivering this extensive talk on very short notice, and I'm sure students have gained a lot through your experience and attached to the lecture. So thank you again. So to everybody. So good night to everybody.
Thank you very
sir.
much for giving this opportunity, and thank you. Good night.
Okay, good night.